The pale, bony alien sitting in the Iridian emissary throne cackled and said, "When the Galactic Council sees the power of the Iridian Empire, they'll be pissing their alien pants in fear. Their feeble minds will finally comprehend the meaning of true adrenaline as they feel the terror we'll inflict. They don't even believe human adrenaline is real." The council chamber on the Odrine homeworld was alive with heated voices, like a box of scurrying sandrats. The emissaries from over 50 galactic civilizations were arguing and yelling over the intergalactic video relay, a scene of utter pandemonium. Suddenly, the towering diamond double doors into the council chamber burst open, with a deafening crack. A cloaked human stumbled onto the gleaming obsidian floor, clutching a palm-sized pyramidal data prism in his right hand. He was dirty, covered in purple dust, sweat stains coating his dark grey camo armor. The man was panting heavily, revealing himself as Kevin Reed, the reluctant human emissary. The council devolved into utter chaos as the alien emissaries bellowed and screeched in their myriad native tongues. The auto-translators struggled to make sense of the bedlam. "No, we should negotiate and come to a diplomatic solution." "There is no negotiating with Iridian scum. We must fight." Kevin strode to the central debate floor, his magnetic boots clanking on the polished volcanic rock. "The data is clear. Talking won't solve anything. I know none of you think humanity's special forces can pull it off. But we have a plan. My commandos will strike their main weapons depot on Indrakis 7. They'll never see us coming. And if all else fails, we have a secret weapon. Pure, undiluted human adrenaline." Kevin clenched his fist, his knuckles white. If the humans failed in this mission, the Iridian planet killer would be completed, and it would mean the end of not just human civilization, but all civilizations the Iridians saw as future conquests. The survival of humanity, and the freedom of the galaxy itself all hinged on this one desperate plan. Human adrenaline would have to be enough. The council erupted with skeptical murmurs. The Odrian premier scoffed, "Adrenaline? What nonsense is this? You expect us to believe humans have some secret hormone that makes them superhuman?" Kevin slammed his armored fist on the obsidian podium. "You all underestimate us. Adrenaline is a fight-or-flight response unique to humans. In moments of extreme danger, it floods our system, enhancing strength, speed, focus. Let me prove it to you." He pointed at Horus, the Iridian emissary. "You, let's fight hand-to-hand right here. If I can match you in combat, will you take the human adrenaline seriously?" The council members backed up, forming a ring. Kevin and Horus circled each other, eyes locked. Horus lunged, his clawed hands slashing. Kevin ducked and weaved, narrowly dodging the strikes. His heart pounded, adrenaline surging through his veins. Everything seemed to slow down. Horus swung again. This time Kevin parried, his armored forearm deflecting the blow. He retaliated with a flurry of punches to Horus's torso. The Iridian grunted, stepping back. They traded blows, a whirlwind of fists and feet. Kevin felt his knuckles split, his ribs bruising, but he pushed through the pain. After several intense minutes they disengaged, both panting and bloodied. It was a draw. The council watched in stunned silence. Kevin had held his own against a being twice his size. "There, you see. That's the power of adrenaline," Kevin said between breaths. "Now imagine a whole squad of humans, trained commandos with that same edge. We can infiltrate the Iridian facility, destroy that planet killer." The Odrian premier shook his head. "It's too risky. If you fail—" "We won't fail," Kevin interrupted. "But if we do nothing, the Iridians will slaughter us all. This is our only shot. Give me a team, a stealth frigate. That's all I need." The council members looked to each other, then back to Kevin. Finally, the premier sighed. "Very well, human. You have our authorization, but know that the fate of the galaxy rests on your shoulders." As the council adjourned, Kevin limped out of the chamber, his mind racing. He had to assemble his team fast. He pulled out his comms unit and started making calls, reaching out to every soldier, mercenary, and spec ops friend he could trust. This was going to be the most dangerous mission of his life. Infiltrating a top-secret Iridian facility, destroying a doomsday weapon with nothing but a handful of humans. It was insanity, but it was the only way. Failure was not an option. If the Iridians completed that planet killer, it would mean galactic genocide. Only Kevin and his band of human commandos stood in their way. He just prayed their adrenaline would be enough. Kevin strode through the hangar bay of the stealth frigate, his gaze flicking across the dozen hardened soldiers gearing up for the mission. His hand-picked team, each one a grizzled veteran of Earth's bloodiest conflicts. As he passed out the vials of Surge, the experimental adrenaline drug, Kevin couldn't help but wonder if it would be enough against the Iridian's superior physiology. A flicker of movement caught his eye, and Kevin spun, hand darting to the plasma pistol at his hip. But instead of an Iridian assassin, he found himself face to face with a cloaked figure, hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. "I am Zalcor," the figure said, pulling back his hood to reveal pale, bony features. "I come to offer my aid in your mission against my people." Kevin's eyes narrowed. And why would an Iridian turn against his own kind? "Because I have seen the depths of their cruelty, the worlds left barren in their wake. I can no longer be part of such wanton destruction." Zalcor reached into his cloak and produced a data chip. This contains access codes to the weapons facility, as well as schematics of the planet killer itself. Kevin hesitated, then took the chip. As much as he distrusted the Iridian, he couldn't afford to turn down any advantage. "If this is a trick—" "I assure you it is not. I will accompany you on your mission to prove my sincerity." Zalcor's gaze was steady, unflinching. With a curt nod, Kevin pocketed the chip. "All right. But if I suspect for a second that you're leading us into a trap, I won't hesitate to put a plasma bolt through your skull." The journey to the Iridian-controlled system was fraught with peril. The stealth frigate wove through asteroid fields, narrowly avoiding detection by patrolling warships. Kevin and his team spent the hours in tense silence, checking and rechecking their weapons, running combat simulations in the VR pods. As they approached the heavily guarded moonbase, Kevin gathered his team in the cargo hold. "All right, listen up. We've got one shot at this. Zalcor will get us inside, then we split into 2 teams. Alpha team, with me, we're going after the planet killer. Beta team, your job is to plant the explosives and create a diversion." He held up a vial of shimmering blue liquid. "This is Surge. It'll give you a boost when you need it most, but it burns out quick. Use it wisely." The infiltration went smoothly, Zalcor's codes granting them access to the sprawling facility. But as they made their way deeper into the complex, alarms began to blare. Iridian soldiers poured into the corridors, plasma rifles blazing. Kevin and his team met them head-on, adrenaline surging through their veins. They moved with preternatural speed and reflexes, dodging plasma bolts and returning fire with deadly precision. The air filled with the stench of ozone and charred flesh. As they battled their way towards the central chamber housing the planet killer, a figure stepped out from the shadows. Horus, the Iridian champion, his eyes glinting with malice. "You dare to invade our sacred base? You will pay for your insolence with your lives," he snarled, unsheathing a pair of crackling energy blades. Kevin stepped forward, activating his own plasma sword. "The only one dying today is you, Horus. Your planet killer will never fire." The 2 warriors circled each other, blades humming. Then, with a roar, they clashed, sparks flying as they traded blows with blinding speed. Around them, the battle raged, humans and Iridians locked in a dance of death. Kevin could feel the surge burning in his blood, his muscles screaming with the strain of matching Horus's inhuman strength. But he pushed through the pain, driven by the knowledge that the fate of countless worlds hung in the balance. The plasma sword crackled and sizzled as it clashed against Horus's energy blades. Kevin gritted his teeth, muscles straining as he pushed back against the Iridian's inhuman strength. Around them, the control room shook with explosions, sparks raining down from shattered consoles. "Fall back to the reactor core," Kevin yelled over the din of battle. "We have to keep Horus away from the control console." Zalcor nodded, firing off a burst from his plasma rifle to cover their retreat. They sprinted down the smoke-filled corridor, the sound of Horus's furious roar echoing behind them. "Negative, Beta Team. Proceed with evacuation. We'll handle Horus and the planet killer." Kevin's voice was strained as he vaulted over a collapsed beam, Zalcor close on his heels. They burst into the reactor chamber, a cavernous space dominated by the pulsing, plasma-filled core. A narrow catwalk extended out over the seething energy, leading to a secondary control platform. "The manual override," Zalcor panted, pointing. "If we can reach it, we can disable the planet killer permanently." But before they could take a step, Horus emerged from the smoke, his eyes blazing with fury. "You will not deny us our victory, human scum!" He lunged at Kevin, his energy blades slashing in a dizzying flurry. Kevin parried and dodged, the adrenaline drug surge burning through his veins, pushing his reflexes to their limit. Zalcor rushed to the catwalk, ducking under a hail of plasma bolts from the automated defenses. He reached the control platform and began frantically typing commands into the console. The reactor core pulsed erratically, warning alarms blaring. The facility shuddered, cracked spiderwebbing across the walls. Kevin and Horus fought on, locked in a deadly dance above the churning reactor. Plasma sword met energy blade in a blinding clash, the warriors' faces inches apart. "You fight well for a primate," Horus snarled, "but you are no match for Iridian might." "We'll see about that," Kevin grunted, shoving Horus back with a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength. The Iridian stumbled, his foot slipping on the edge of the catwalk. For a moment he teetered, arms windmilling. Then, with a howl of rage, he plummeted into the reactor core, vanishing in a blaze of plasma. Kevin staggered, chest heaving. Zalcor's shout snapped him back to the present. "The override, it's not responding." Kevin raced to the console, his heart pounding. The screen flashed red, a countdown ticking away. The planet killer was still armed, still ready to launch. Together they worked frantically, trying every bypass and override code they could think of. But the system remained locked, the countdown marching inexorably towards zero. The facility bucked and heaved around them, the reactor core destabilizing. Plasma geysered from ruptured conduits, melting through metal and stone. "We have to go now." Zalcor grabbed Kevin's arm, dragging him towards the exit. "The whole place is coming down." But Kevin pulled free, turning back to the console. "I can't let that weapon fire. I have to stop it no matter the cost." Zalcor hesitated, then nodded grimly. "Then we do it together." As the countdown neared its end, as the reactor reached critical mass, the two unlikely allies worked side by side, pouring every last ounce of skill and determination into their desperate task. The seconds ticked away, the room filled with blinding light, and then the control room erupted in a cacophony of sparks and screeching metal as the reactor reached critical mass. The floor bucked and heaved, throwing Kevin and Zalcor off balance. Kevin lunged for Horus, slamming into the Iridian commander with bone-crushing force. The two warriors tumbled off the catwalk, plummeting into the reactor chamber below. They crashed through a tangle of pipes and conduits, the jagged metal tearing at their armor. Kevin's adrenaline surged, dulling the pain of each brutal impact. He managed to grab onto a support beam, his fingers digging into the steel. Horus, less fortunate, plunged into a pool of seething radioactive coolant. Kevin hauled himself up onto the beam, his enhanced strength straining against the pull of gravity. He began to climb, hand over hand, back towards the control room. The reactor shuddered and groaned around him, the countdown to meltdown echoing in his ears. In the control room, Zalcor's fingers flew across the console, initiating the evacuation sequence. Warning klaxons blared, urging all personnel to flee. The Iridian scientist glanced at the countdown, his heart pounding. They had minutes, at most, before the reactor blew. A roar from below froze Zalcor's blood. He looked down into the reactor chamber and saw a nightmare-made flesh. Horus, his body twisted and deformed by the radioactive coolant, was scaling the walls with inhuman speed. The Iridian's eyes blazed with an unholy fury, fixed on Kevin and Zalcor. Kevin reached the control room, his armor smoking and scorched. He saw Horus coming, a mutated abomination hungry for revenge. The human commando knew there was no time to escape, no time to save himself. He turned to Zalcor, his voice raw with urgency. Zalcor hesitated, torn between loyalty and survival. But... "That's an order," Kevin barked, his tone brooking no argument. "I'll hold off Horus, make sure this place blows. It's the only way." Zalcor nodded, his eyes filled with a grim understanding. He turned and ran, racing towards the evacuation pods. Behind him, he heard the sounds of battle, of Kevin and Horus clashing amidst the crumbling reactor. Kevin fought with a savage ferocity, his adrenaline-fueled strength matching Horus's mutated might. They traded blows, fists and feet, slamming into armor and flesh. The reactor buckled and quaked, explosions tearing through its superstructure. Debris rained down on the combatants, jagged shards of metal and cascades of sparks. The air shimmered with heat, the temperature rising to unbearable levels, but Kevin and Horus fought on, locked in a deadly embrace as the world collapsed around them. In a blinding flash, the reactor core detonated, the shockwave slamming into the evacuation pods like a physical blow. Zalcor gripped the control yoke, fighting to keep the small craft steady as it was buffeted by the debris field. The human commandos, battered and bleeding, stared out the viewports in stunned silence, watching as the Iridian weapons facility was torn apart by the explosion. Sergeant Hawkins, his face pale beneath the grime and blood, turned to Zalcor. "Kevin, did he make it out?" Zalcor didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the scanners. The debris was too thick, the radiation too intense to get a clear reading. In his heart, he feared the worst. No one could have survived that blast, not even a human with adrenaline coursing through their veins. Suddenly the proximity alarms blared, snapping the team out of their daze. A massive shape emerged from the swirling clouds of debris, its angular lines and bristling weapon arrays unmistakable. A Iridian warship, its shields flaring as it plowed through the wreckage. "Evasive maneuvers," Zalcor barked, wrenching the control yoke. The evacuation pod lurched and spun, narrowly avoiding a salvo of plasma bolts. The warship loomed above them, its weapons charging for another volley. Just as the warship's gunners locked on, a streak of silver shot out of the debris field, lasers flashing. A Iridian fighter, its hull scorched and battered, barreled towards the warship, drawing its fire. The fighter wove and dodged, its pilot displaying an almost preternatural skill as it evaded the warship's attacks. Zalcor watched in astonishment as the fighter danced through the laser fire, its own weapons scoring hits along the warship's shields. It was a daring move, one that bought precious time for the evacuation pods to slip away. But the warship's defenses were too strong, its firepower too overwhelming. The fighter, already badly damaged, took a direct hit to its engines. It spun out of control, trailing smoke and flames as it spiraled towards a nearby planet. Zalcor tore his gaze away from the doomed fighter, focusing on the task at hand. He punched in the coordinates for the rendezvous point, the evacuation pod's engines flaring as it accelerated away from the battle. On the planet's surface, a plume of smoke rose from the wreckage of the crashed fighter. The cockpit canopy, blackened and cracked, hissed open, revealing a figure in scorched and dented armor. Kevin Reed, his face a mask of blood and bruises, dragged himself from the wreckage, his adrenaline-fueled body screaming with pain. He had barely made it to the Iridian fighter before the reactor blew, the shockwave nearly tearing the small craft apart. But he had survived, through sheer grit and the enhancing effects of the surge. Now, as he staggered away from the crash site, he found himself alone on an alien world, his allies gone, his means of escape destroyed. Kevin checked his weapons, his motion scanner, the meager supplies he had managed to salvage from the fighter. He knew the dangers that lurked on Iridian-controlled planets, the vicious predators and hostile terrain. But he had no choice. He had to find a way to signal his team, to get off this rock and back into the fight. With grim determination, ignoring the pain that lanced through his battered body, Kevin set off into the unknown, his adrenaline-enhanced senses alert for any sign of danger. He had survived the impossible, had struck a blow against the Iridian Empire. But his mission was far from over. Across the galaxy, in the halls of the Galactic Council, News of the weapons facility's destruction spread like wildfire. The Iridian ambassador, his face twisted with rage, denounced the attack as an act of war, demanding retribution against the humans and their allies. But other voices rose in opposition, emboldened by the humans' success. The destruction of the planet killer, the defection of a high-ranking Iridian scientist, these were signs that the Empire was not invincible, that its tyrannical rule could be challenged. In secret meetings and encrypted transmissions, a coalition began to form. Species from across the galaxy united in their determination to end the Iridian threat once and for all. They had seen the power of human adrenaline, the tenacity and courage of this upstart species. Perhaps with humanity at their side, they could finally bring down the Empire and restore freedom to the stars. But even as hope kindled in the hearts of the oppressed, a darker force stirred in the ruins of the weapons facility. Amidst the twisted metal and shattered stone, a figure crawled from the wreckage, his flesh seared and warped by the reactor's fury. Horus, his body mutated beyond recognition, his mind consumed by an all-consuming rage, dragged himself clear of the debris. The pain that racked his twisted form only fueled his hatred, his desire for vengeance against the human who had brought him low. He would hunt down Kevin Reed, would make him suffer as he had suffered, and then, with the human's broken body at his feet, he would turn his wrath upon the rest of humanity, would see their worlds burn and their people enslaved. The Iridian Empire would rise again, stronger and more terrible than ever before, and all would tremble before the might of Horus, the undefeated, the unbreakable, the bringer of death. Kevin trudged through the dense undergrowth of the alien jungle, his adrenaline-enhanced senses on high alert. The humidity clung to his skin, the air thick with the chirps and trills of strange creatures. As he pushed deeper into the foliage, the terrain grew more treacherous, jagged rocks and gnarled roots threatening to trip him at every step. Suddenly, through the green haze, Kevin spotted the unmistakable lines of artificial structures, ancient ruins, their stone facades covered in twisting vines and alien script. Heart pounding, he approached the crumbling entrance, his instincts screaming that this place held secrets that could change the course of the war. The interior of the ruins was dark, the air stale and musty. Kevin activated his suit's flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. The walls were lined with intricate carvings depicting a long-extinct species and their advanced technology. He moved deeper into the complex, his footsteps echoing off the stone. Abruptly, the floor beneath him gave way, sending him tumbling into a hidden chamber. Kevin landed hard, his adrenaline surging as he rolled to his feet, plasma rifle at the ready. The room was vast, dominated by a central dais upon which rested a pulsing, crystalline device. The power source, Kevin breathed, moving towards it cautiously. If he could harness its energy, it could give the human resistance the edge they so desperately needed. Just as his fingers brushed the device's surface, a searing bolt of plasma scorched the stone beside him. Kevin whirled, dropping into a combat crouch as a dozen Iridian soldiers poured into the chamber, their weapons blazing. Leading them was Zarvik, his eyes glinting with malice. "Surrender, human," he snarled, his rifle aimed at Kevin's heart. "You're outnumbered and outmatched." Kevin's jaw clenched, his grip tightening on his own weapon. He knew Zarvik was right, but surrender was not an option. The fate of humanity, of the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. "I don't think so," Kevin growled, his adrenaline spiking. With a burst of enhanced speed, he dove behind a crumbling pillar, plasma bolts sizzling through the air where he'd stood a heartbeat before. The chamber erupted into chaos, the Iridians advancing, their weapons raking the ruins. Kevin returned fire, his shots precise and deadly. He moved from cover to cover, staying one step ahead of Zarvik's soldiers, using the ruins' own defenses against them. Ancient traps sprung to life, energy fields and hidden pitfalls claiming Iridian after Iridian, but Zarvik himself remained untouched, his eyes locked on Kevin, his pursuit relentless. Kevin knew he couldn't keep this up forever. His adrenaline was burning through his system, his muscles screaming with fatigue. He needed a plan, a way to end this fight and claim the power source. His gaze fell on the device, still pulsing on the dais. If he could reach it, activate it, perhaps he could take out Zarvik and his soldiers in one fell swoop. But the risk was immense. The energy surge could just as easily destroy Kevin himself, and the entire ruins with him. Plasma scorched the stone above his head, jolting Kevin back to the present. Zarvik was closing in, his face twisted in a triumphant snarl. Kevin made his choice. With a final surge of adrenaline, he launched himself from cover, sprinting towards the dais. Plasma bolts filled the air around him, his shields flaring as they absorbed the hits. He reached the device, his hand slamming down on the activation switch. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a blinding flash, a wave of energy exploded outwards, engulfing the chamber. Heridians screamed as the surge tore through them, their bodies disintegrating into ash. Zarvik howled in rage and agony, his form consumed by the searing light. The ruins shuddered, cracks racing up the walls, dust raining down from the ceiling. Kevin, exhausted and battered, snatched up the power source and ran, stumbling through the collapsing corridors as the ancient structure crumbled around him. He burst from the ruins just as they imploded, the ground heaving beneath his feet. Kevin staggered away from the destruction, clutching the power source to his chest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. With shaking hands, Kevin pulled out the ancient communicator he'd recovered from the ruins. It flared to life, connecting him to Zalcor and the human resistance. "Zalcor, it's Kevin," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I've got something, a power source from the ruins. It could change everything." Zalcor's reply was filled with static, but his words were clear. "Kevin, you need to get back here fast. The Coalition is preparing for a final assault on the Iridian homeworld. We need every advantage we can get." Kevin nodded, though Zalcor couldn't see him. "I'm on my way." He pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain that lanced through his body. The battle in the ruins had taken its toll, but he couldn't rest, not yet. The fate of the galaxy was at stake, and Kevin had a war to win. With the power source secure and a new determination burning in his heart, he set off into the jungle, ready to rejoin the fight and end the Iridian threat once and for all. Kevin strode into the Coalition staging area, the ancient adrenaline amplifier device tucked under his arm. The alien technology hummed with latent power, its crystalline surface pulsing with an otherworldly glow. Scientists and engineers swarmed around him, their eyes wide with excitement and trepidation. "The amplifier could give us the edge we need," Dr. Lena Sorensen, the lead human researcher, said as she examined the device. "But it's unstable. We need a rare mineral to stabilize the power core." Zalcor, hunched over a holographic display, looked up. A remote mining outpost deep in Iridian space, heavily guarded. A grim silence fell over the room. They all knew the risks, the stakes, but Kevin had no doubt. "I'll lead the raid myself. Assemble a team of our best commandos, human and alien. We leave at nightfall." Hours later, Kevin and his hand-picked strike team crouched in the shadow of a towering drill rig. The Iridian mining facility loomed before them, its perimeter bristling with armor and guns. The commandos checked their weapons, the experimental adrenaline-enhancing armor glinting in the starlight. Kevin could feel his heart pounding, his senses sharpening to a razor's edge. The amplifier was a thrumming weight on his back. "3, 2, 1, breach!" Kevin hissed into the comm. The team surged forward, plasma rifles roaring. Iridian guards fell, their surprised shouts drowned out by the din of battle. They fought their way into the heart of the facility, their enhanced speed and strength overwhelming the defenders. But as they neared the mineral storage chamber, a thunderous boom shook the ground. A monstrous war machine burst through the wall, its armored bulk bristling with weapons. And in its cockpit a familiar face leered at them. "Zarvik," Kevin snarled, "I thought I buried you." The Iridian laughed, his voice distorted by cybernetic implants. "You thought wrong, human. Now you will witness the true might of the Iridian Empire." The war machine charged, its cannon spitting superheated plasma. Kevin and his team scattered, returning fire with everything they had. But Zarvik was relentless, his machine shrugging off their shots like rain. They danced a deadly dance through the chamber, adrenaline-fueled commandos against cybernetic monstrosity. Explosions rocked the room, rubble crashing down around them. Kevin's team fell one by one, their armor broken, their bodies shattered. In a last desperate gambit, Kevin leapt onto the war machine, his armor's grav boots locking onto the hull. He tore open the cockpit hatch, coming face to face with Zarvik. The Iridian lashed out, his cybernetic fists a blur. Kevin met him blow for blow, his adrenaline-enhanced strength pushing his body to its limits. They grappled, sparks and blood flying. Kevin's vision blurred, his lungs screaming for air. His hands scrabbled at his belt, fingers closing around a plasma grenade. With a roar of defiance, he slammed the grenade into the war machine's exposed power core. The explosion was deafening. The war machine buckled, its hull rupturing. Kevin felt himself thrown clear, his armor absorbing the worst of the blast. He hit the ground hard, the world spinning around him. As the dust settled, Kevin dragged himself to his feet. The war machine lay in ruins, buried beneath a mountain of rubble. Zarvik was nowhere to be seen. Kevin limped to the mineral storage, his battered team regrouping around him. They had the vital component. Now the real fight could begin. The final battle for the galaxy's future awaited. The space around the Iridian homeworld erupted in a maelstrom of weapons fire and explosions as the Coalition fleet unleashed the full might of the adrenaline amplifier. The device pulsed with an otherworldly energy, suffusing the Coalition warriors with unimaginable strength and speed. Kevin led the charge, his strike team cutting through the Iridian defenses with relentless fury. The adrenaline surged through their veins, their reflexes and senses heightened to superhuman levels. Plasma bolts ricocheted off their armor as they stormed the capital city, a gleaming metropolis of towering spires and fortified bastions. The streets became a war zone, the air thick with the stench of ozone and scorched metal. Kevin and his team moved with blinding speed, vaulting over barricades and scaling walls as they engaged the Iridian forces in brutal close-quarters combat. Plasma swords clashed against energy shields, the ground trembling beneath the thunder of explosions. As they pushed deeper into the city, the resistance intensified. Iridian soldiers poured from every building and alleyway, their weapons spitting deadly streams of energy. But Kevin and his team were unstoppable, their adrenaline-fueled strength allowing them to shrug off wounds that would have felled any ordinary warrior. Suddenly, a new threat emerged from the chaos. A legion of Iridian super-soldiers, their bodies pulsing with an unnatural red glow, surged forward to meet the Coalition advance. These genetically engineered monstrosities moved with a speed and ferocity that matched even the adrenaline-enhanced humans, their fists and feet slamming into armor with bone-shattering force. Kevin found himself locked in a brutal melee with a hulking Iridian brute, the creature's grotesquely muscled arms swinging with abandon. He ducked and weaved, his adrenaline-sharpened reflexes allowing him to stay one step ahead of the onslaught. With a roar of defiance, Kevin slammed his fist into the brute's chest, the blow powered by the adrenaline amplifier. The Iridian staggered back, its armor cracking under the impact. All around him the battle raged with renewed intensity. The Iridian super-soldiers pressed their attack, their savagery and resilience pushing the Coalition warriors to their limits. Plasma bolts and energy blades clashed in a dizzying display of violence, the very air shimmering with the heat of the conflict. In the heart of the chaos, a monstrous figure loomed, its body a twisted fusion of flesh and metal. Horus, reborn as a nightmarish cyborg, his eyes blazing with an inhuman hatred. The Iridian champion fixed his gaze on Kevin, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Adrenaline or not, you will fall before me, human," Horus snarled, his voice a grating, mechanical rasp. "I will tear you apart, piece by piece, and savor every scream." The two nemeses charged, their bodies propelled by the full force of their rage and the adrenaline amplifier. They clashed in the center of the ruined city, their battle a whirlwind of blows and countermoves. Buildings crumbled and streets cratered under the force of their struggle, the very ground quaking beneath their feet. Horus lashed out with a flurry of cybernetic limbs, each strike powered by the Iridian's twisted enhancements. Kevin dodged and parried, his adrenaline-fueled reflexes pushed to their absolute limit. He retaliated with a barrage of his own, his armored fists slamming into Horus's body with enough force to shatter bone. But Horus seemed to feel no pain, his mutated flesh absorbing the blows with sickening resilience. He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed across the battlefield. "Is that all you've got, human?" he taunted, his cybernetic eye whirring as it locked onto Kevin. "I expected more from the champion of your pathetic species." Kevin gritted his teeth, the adrenaline burning in his blood. He knew he had to end this fast before Horus's enhancements gave him the upper hand. With a roar of defiance, he launched himself at the Iridian champion, his fists pummeling Horus's body with a relentless barrage. The two warriors staggered through the ruins of the city, trading blows that would have shattered mountains. Buildings collapsed around them, the debris raining down in a hail of shattered glass and twisted metal. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, the outcome of their battle deciding the course of the war. Kevin and Horus clashed in a whirlwind of adrenaline-fueled violence, their battle shaking the very foundations of the Iridian capital. Buildings crumbled and streets cratered as the two titans exchanged blows, each strike powered by a savage, inhuman strength. Kevin's armor, already battered and scorched, buckled under the onslaught, warning lights flashing across his HUD. But Kevin fought on, his body and mind pushed to their absolute limits by the adrenaline amplifier. He ducked and weaved, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to evade Horus's crushing blows by mere inches. Concrete shattered, and metal screeched as they plowed through walls and vehicles alike, their duel leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. With a roar of defiance, Kevin launched himself at Horus, his fist connecting with the mutated Iridian's jaw with a sickening crunch. Horus staggered back, his grotesque face twisted in a snarl of pain and rage. Kevin pressed his advantage, raining down a flurry of punches and kicks that sent his nemesis crashing through a series of buildings. As the dust cleared, Kevin stood over Horus's prone form, his chest heaving with exertion. He raised his fist, ready to deliver the final, crushing blow. But something in Horus's eyes made him hesitate. For a fleeting moment, he saw a flicker of the old Horus, the proud warrior he had once known, buried beneath the layers of mutation and madness. In that instant, Horus's eyes widened, a look of grim determination crossing his face. With a final defiant roar, he activated a hidden self-destruct mechanism in his armor, a last act of rebellion against his Iridian masters. The explosion was deafening, a blinding flash of light and heat that engulfed both warriors. The shockwave ripped through the surrounding city blocks, leveling buildings and sending debris flying in all directions. Kevin felt himself lifted off his feet, his body ragdolling through the air before slamming into a crumbling wall. As the ringing in his ears subsided, Kevin dragged himself to his feet, every inch of his body screaming in agony. His armor hung in tatters, his skin blistered and bleeding. Around him the Iridian capital lay in ruins, the once mighty city reduced to a smouldering wasteland. In the distance, he could hear the sounds of battle, the coalition forces pressing their advantage against the disoriented Iridian super-soldiers. With Horus's defeat, the tide had turned, the Iridian Empire's last line of defense crumbling before the onslaught of the adrenaline-enhanced warriors. Kevin limped through the rubble, his body on the verge of collapse. He had given everything, pushed himself beyond the limits of human endurance, but as he watched the coalition ships descending from the smoke-filled sky, he knew that it had all been worth it. The galaxy was free, the Iridian threat vanquished at last. In the days that followed, as Kevin lay in a hospital bed, his body slowly healing from the grievous wounds he had sustained, he watched the news feeds with a mixture of pride and sorrow. The Galactic Council had convened, the Iridian Empire forced to surrender unconditionally in the face of its crushing defeat. But the cost had been high. Entire worlds lay in ruins, countless lives lost on both sides. As Kevin looked at the faces of his fallen comrades, their images flickering across the screen, he felt a hollow ache in his chest. The adrenaline that had once fueled their victories now seemed like a distant memory, a bitter reminder of the sacrifices they had made. And yet, as he gazed out the window at the stars, Kevin knew that their legacy would endure. The scars of the war would linger, but so too would the memory of those who had fought and died to secure the galaxy's freedom. The adrenaline-fueled warriors of Earth, their courage and sacrifice, would forever be remembered as a shining beacon of hope in the face of tyranny and oppression. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.